Hi everyone, I've just quickly thrown this video together. Well, it's not really a video, it's just a series of pictures that I took when I was painting that White Mk1 Escort that you saw in the last video. I actually tried to record this the other day, this voiceover, but the microphone in the laptop isn't quite up to it, so I've got something new at the moment. I'm trying it, we'll see how it goes. So the car came to me on a rotisserie so I could get underneath it. He'd patched up a few places, so it had blue wrapped a liner over it everywhere, which needed covering. So we got to it with a bit of the underbody primer before hitting it with the just the 2K direct gloss that we did on the rest of the car. We moved on to the interior next, and there's some holes to fill up in the rear quarter panels, as well as just a general tidy up inside, cleaning it up. Gave it a scuff up with some Scotch-Brite pads and a fair bit of a blowout. Still ended up with a fair bit of junk in the paintwork inside, but just dust and particles and stuff like that. But it came up all okay, and the best thing about it was all that blue was gone. So at this stage it was still on the rotisserie, and I took it off after that, fairly soon after that. Didn't come up too bad. I had a trolley that I'd made up for the yellow RS2000 that I used underneath this one as well. So the first task was to set about getting all the panels lined up as best I could when the doors and the bonnet and that were still on the car. I need a little bit of hammer and dolly work, as well as a bit of filler, which you'll see a bit later on. So the guards there needed a bit of work, was very wavy on the top. So this is just fairly heavy sort of filler. It's the regular panel filler, not the fine stuff there at the moment. All the panels started to line up pretty good. Wasn't too unhappy with all that, so passenger side guard needed a little bit more work at the top, and then started hitting with some fine filler as well. Across the back of the boot was very average, so spent quite a few hours working on that, getting it all straight again. Then hit it with some fine filler. So this is before even doing any of the etch or any of the high build primers. Fuel filler's been relocated to up the panel on this one, so need a little bit of work around it to smooth it all out and fill it up. Once the back was done, onto the etch primer. Grey etch primer is a wattle super etch product. It's quite good. That was how the boot lid was when we first got it. Did a bit of panel beating, got it reasonably straight. And the panel gaps were fairly average. That side wasn't too bad. The left side was fairly close, so it had to get hammered out and filled up a little bit. Then on there with a bit of etch and move on to the next thing. So yeah, the filler on the back wasn't very thick, but it needed it the whole way across to level it up. Next job was fitting all the doors up and getting the panel gaps right. There's a bit of a dent in the right front guard there. Getting all that right, the edges of the doors were sunken in a little bit compared with the rest of the body, so a little bit of bending, a little bit of filler, and it all come out fairly good. So the front left guard needed a little bit of work. The previous bog that was on there had actually chipped and had fallen out, so fixed up that best we could. A little bit more in the front corner of each of the doors, and was all ready to go. So the next thing was sort of just doing general sanding back on the rest of the body. It had been undercoated in some sort of red primer previously, and I don't know what that was, but that was on the rear scuttle panel. It was really thick and really chipped, so that just got the abrasive, the wire, not a wire wheel, but one of those wire type discs on it, and cleaned it all out. So then went around the rest of the car, just sanding back with 180, getting rid of any of the loose paint that was on there. The guards that are on there were put on by someone else. They're a fiberglass guard. Not too bad, just still need a little bit of finishing work on it. and anywhere where you see that dark is the etch primer that I've put on there. Across the back there after it was cleaned up with the wire wheel. And so on around the car. That filler there was in the car when I got it. So there's a bit of that filler work that was high in places and low in other places. So, and you can see here once we get the 2K on it, how uneven it was in places. So the boot was tidied up. Once again, just with the Scotch-Brite and thin rags with thinners on it as much as you can to clean it up, and then painted with the same external paint as the rest of the car. And that was, once that was done, it was out of the way, so just masked it up and moved on to the doors. The inside of the doors needed a little bit of work here and there just to patch up a few holes that were in it, and a little bit of rust dents that were in the bottom of it. So once that was done, just gave it a coat of etch primer, and after that they actually sat around for probably a couple of months before I got back to them again. So yeah, just little pitting areas like that. The outside had a lot of filler in it to start with. We added a little bit in there just to level up the doors and the guards. So didn't pay a huge amount of attention to the inside of the boot, just cleaned it up, etch primed where it was bare, some of the spotlights and other bolt-on bits and pieces that I all got together one day, put in the blast cabinet and cleaned them up, and then just hit it with the etch primer and then straight on with the 2K on top of that. I've done that heaps of times on heaps of different cars and it seems to stick quite well, so no use going to the extra step of putting other primer on it. You could probably put some wet on wet or 1K sort of primer on it, but usually don't bother for the parts like this. So the last bit to get tidied up was the roof. There was a bit of a dent right in the middle of the roof there that I managed to panel beat most of it out and then get the body file onto it to bring it down. So the last hard part to tackle was the engine bay. It was already white, but a very different shade of white to the rest of the car, and it needed a lot of tidying up. I got stuck into that and a little bit of fine filler here and there, not too much. And once that was ready, etched any areas that needed etching, and then just used the single pack 1K on it. It's a not a Colad, General Paints product. And that's it there, it's a lighter grey. And then a little bit of seam sealer. You can see the white there in places that needed it. And then just hit it with the direct gloss 2K again. So that's now all the little fiddly bits and that were done. The boot was done and the engine bay was done, the underside was done and the interior was done. So I could just concentrate on doing the rest of the car. The last bit of filler work on the outside was underneath the front panel. It didn't take too long to sort all that out. Quick coat of etch, and then on with the 2K high build primer. Stuff I'm using there is a General Paints high build. It's paint number 4462. It gave it 3 good coats, and then due to other work around the place, it probably sat around for 2 or 3 weeks before I even got back onto it. Using a Colad, the black dry guide coat. In a lot of the places it was okay, but as you'll see later on, there was quite a lot of cut throughs as well. The roof was pretty good at that stage, so I didn't have to reprime that later on. The tops of the doors and that weren't too bad. Around the back arches and that needed a little bit of fine filler in it, so I think on this side I just did the 1K primer after it, but on the other side it was bad enough just to need a quick splash of the 2K again. Around here you can see that bit of filler down the bottom there. Yeah, that there was pretty average, so once I'd sanded that back I just hit it with the 2K again, and all this sanding was done with a long block and 180 grit. I've got a vacuum cleaner set up there because at the moment I just don't have any other room apart from doing it actually in the booth. So any of the blocks that I use the vacuum cleaner on it. There's another video somewhere on my site there of the cyclone I put in front of it to capture all the dust. So then went down through the grades, the 320, and then any of the cut throughs I prime it over, and before giving it its final 500 cut back. And getting it ready, all masked up, ready for the direct gloss. As you can see so far, that the actual painting part of it's only just this small little bit at the end. It came out pretty good. As you'll see later, I think there was only 2 runs on the body that I picked up, whereas I stuffed the doors up pretty good a bit later on. That was actually with 3 coats of it on there. At this stage the weather was still fairly warm, so I didn't have any issues with the paint. It just went too hard a couple of places just in front of the rear arch there, and it was on the back of the boot down near the right hand tail light, but they all cleaned up pretty easily. So once the body was done, it was pushed outside and got onto the doors, boot and bonnet, and it's essentially just the same process over again. The 2K high build primer. I tend to fix up any of the, like the gunman said, just fix up any of the little pinholes and imperfections you can see right off the bat before you even go sanding into it, which is why the filler there has sometimes got the guide coat over the top of it. The bonnet was fairly average once I started cutting into it, and it came back to metal in a few spots, so out with the fine filler, and I'm pretty sure I gave it another coat of the 2K high build before I finally painted it. Likewise with the doors, once you started filing it, sanding it back with the long block, you can see all the highs and low spots really come out in it. So I did the same with those. Once it's fairly flat, the last coat of high build that I hit with it is thinned down a fair bit, so I don't bother cutting back into it with the 180. I just go straight to the 320 and then the 500. And if it cuts through again, I'll just put the 1K primer on it and move on. Inside of the bonnet there was just a quick clean up, etch primer, and then the gloss directly over the etch primer. Then the inside of the doors. Now the inside of the doors were painted in the satin white, like the interior. So it made a little bit of extra work because once they were painted on the inside, I had to then tape them up and before I could paint the outside. And one of the last bits of blue to disappear was the blue that was on the roll cage. So I just sanded it back with the Scotch-Brite pads, edge primed where it had gone through, and then the direct gloss straight over that. So the last little bits to cop the final paint was the bonnet and the doors, and I really stuffed up painting the doors. I had the wrong gun settings and didn't pick it up early enough, so I managed to get quite a few decent runs on that, which you'll see here in a second. The worst of it was down the bottom rear of this right hand door, like that, and that was actually in the first coat of paint as well. It wasn't in the second. And that's the little run that was in front of the left rear wheel arch. So just got a bit of 500 grit in that, sanded it back, and then worked up through all the grades until it had and glossed it up again. There's that little run near the right hand rear tail light, so it sanded off okay. Probably left a little bit of a thin spot there, but it'll be covered up. And the rest of the body, there was just a few little D-nibs here and there where there was some great big dust blocks in it, but I didn't cut and polish the whole car back. And this one here just used the gunman supplied trick of using the fine filler over the run, and then started off with the 500 bit paper. I ended up using a wider block than what I've shown there, but got into it, and as you can see, it turns it back down. More and more of the run appears, and then the filler finally disappears, and polish it up. So that's about it for this video. Just a few shots of after we'd started to put it back together, and off on the car trailer and heading home. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed. I didn't actually get any video of painting this car at all, so I'm a bit slack, but we'll see what we can do next time. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you later.